Well, welcome. Today the topic is progressive resistance. And I want to remind you of a simple time-tested way that'll help you improve anything that you set your mind to do. And it's called the art or the science of progressive resistance. And the secret of progressive resistance has been handed down from trainer to client, from successful business person to newly successful person for many thousands of years. This is not new stuff, folks, but progressive resistance works. It works in the weightlifting field, it works in training, works in swimming, works in anything. You add a little bit more weight slowly, add a little bit more distance, whatever it is, it works in business, it works in a relationship. It works, it always has. The reason progressive resistance is so effective is because it's easy. It's easy to incrementally improve at anything. And we all love easy. The hardest part of progressive resistance is just getting started and then staying faithful to it. And the beauty of this progressive resistance is that we only need to push ourselves in small doses. Just a little bit at a time, a little bit more, a little bit faster, a little bit harder. You take on a little bit more. We increase our efforts slowly and incrementally. We improve and advance a little bit at a time. And progressive resistance is simply doing more over time. And we start small, we stay faithful, and we increase the weight slowly. You take on more responsibility, just a little bit. We've all been in situations where we were given too much too fast, and it's frustrating. I know Josephine, we joined a gym, and they, the person who signed us up said, "You need to take this class." And so she went in there and took this class that had fast movement, and they used weights, and Josephine's never been a weight lifter, and she hurt herself. It's with, everybody knows you don't start off hard like that because you can hurt yourself, and she did. And she's never been back. She will go back, but so progressive resistance reminds me of the legend of Milo. The legend of Milo. And Milo was an ancient Greek boy who lived in southern Italy around 500 BC. And this boy one day decided to pick up a newborn calf from the farm he was on and to carry it around on his shoulders. They weigh about 40 to 60 pounds. And the next day he did the same thing. And again the following day, and the following day, and the following day. He did it for 4 years. He picked up the same calf, which grew into a full-grown ox in that 4-year span. Each day the calf grew in weight, and each day Milo grew incrementally stronger. And by the time that ox had reached full maturity, Milo had progressively grown strong enough to carry a full-grown ox on his shoulders. And Milo went on to dominate Olympic wrestling for 25 years. And it's a feat that has never been repeated. And Milo, this is a real guy, and Milo stumbled onto and he perfected the science of progressive resistance training. And Milo could never have fully squatted that full-grown ox had he not progressively grown in strength over those 4 years. And he started with a newborn ox weighing that 60, 70 pounds, something like that, and he worked his way up to a mature ox that could weigh anywhere from 1,000 to 3,000 pounds. There's people who can squat 1,000 pounds or close to it. This guy was a bruiser. And one day he walked into the Olympic Stadium carrying an ox. What do you think his opponents would have thought? I'd say their heart might have melted. But it's the art or science of progressive resistance. Just take on a little bit more of something. Or slow down on something that you want to quit. A little bit at a time. Something. Could be thinking. Could be drinking. You fill in the blank. You don't want to slow down on thinking. You want to get better at thinking. See, we too strengthen ourselves and grow in any manner that we decide by progressively adding a little more weight and putting in a little more time into that task, or by increasing the intensity, the mileage, or incrementally taking on more responsibility. Whatever it is, taking on a different role with the team. I remember my son, he was bored. And so when he was in junior high, we'd drop him off at the gym every day, or he'd take the bus to the gym every day. And after school. And the kid got stronger and stronger. He wasn't even really trying to. I mean, he just was bored and didn't know what else to do. So he just practiced, and he started lifting weights, got stronger and stronger, and he got better and better at whatever sport he was in. That's when he learned the beauty of off-season training. Whereas most kids just wanted to play, he just did it. He learned out of boredom. See, each day we decide to take on a little bit more. Progressive resistance is how we grow. It's how anybody grows. It's how anything grows. It doesn't go from a seed to a corn stalk. It's progressive, incremental growth. And the Greek word is oxano that we're going to hit a lot of times. I'm not going to say it again, but it's one many of us are familiar with. In Ephesians chapter 4, and I'm going to read verse 14 through 16 from the Phillips. And it says, "We are not meant to remain as children at the mercy of every chance wind of teaching and the jockeying of men who are expert in the craft presentation of lies. But we are meant to hold firmly to the truth and love and to grow up in every way into Christ, the head. For it is from the head that the whole body, as a harmonious structure knit together by the joints with which it is provided, grows by the proper functioning of individual parts to its full maturity in love." See, like Milo, we're not meant to live a static, inert, motionless life, blown about by the whims of others. We're designed to incrementally grow into the greatest version of ourselves that we could possibly be. We want to grow into the greatest version of ourselves that we could possibly be. Each of you have had that glimpse at some point in your life. You caught a little glimpse somewhere of what you would like to, or you're supposed to be, or push towards. But then we get talked out of it sometimes. We get busy. We have children. We have new jobs. We move around, whatever it is. We get too many hobbies. And then it gets set aside. Well, we can incrementally become that person. That's our goal on earth, is to fulfill our personal calling. Do you know what it is? Everybody thinks they're called to do something great, but very few people know what that calling to greatness is. You do. We're designed to develop into and to dominate our spot in this life, on this earth, while at the same time helping other people find and grow into their best selves. We're designed to incrementally grow into our part of the Christ. If you read that verse, it says grow into Christ. Into. And it means right down into the heart of it. You can grow into whatever Christ was to the best of your ability. That's a pretty big statement Grow into Christ. Now you aren't the Christ, but we represent the Christ. Do we not? Yeah. You see, we can reach full spiritual maturity, but it takes self-discipline and many times trial and error, because we don't know sometimes. We start small, we stay faithful, at times we adapt, and increase slowly. Start small, stay faithful, increase the weight you put on yourself slowly. And that's the art and or science of progressive resistance. Starting small. Just as every goal has an end, every objective has a beginning. And the first step in growth through progressive resistance is to get started. A lot of people can see it, they pray for it, they want it. And they want to get up those stairs, but they just stand there and look up and say, I want to get up those stairs. But we got to get started. Just get started one step at a time. Here's a quote. Do the difficult things while they're easy, and do the great things while they are small. A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. A journey of 1,000 miles must begin with a single step. That's Lao Tzu, an ancient Chinese philosopher, who I think it was about the time Milo was picking up ox. See, this is not new stuff, but this is what the greats know. Take on a little bit more, a little bit more. But if you take too much on at one time, you could hurt yourself. And every athlete knows that. You got to ease back in sometimes if you've laid off for a while. Take whatever steps are necessary to get started on reaching your full potential. Take whatever steps are necessary that it takes to reach our full potential. Get started on the path to reaching your lofty goals. I remember when I first moved to Colorado, I was out of shape and I wasn't acclimatized to the altitude. And so many people around, they seemed so fit and trim. And I felt out of place. And I wanted a little bit of what they had. So I started hiking around the foothills. And I eventually found this trail called Bar Trail, which is very common, but I had never heard of it before. And so about once a week, I'd go up this thing called Bar Trail, or this adjacent torturous set of steps called the incline. And sometimes I would be struggling just to hike up, Bar Trail. And then people would run up past me. And I'd think, how do you do that? How do you do that? Or they'd run up the incline when I just was struggling up. And it was this mountain was a monster to me. But I realized that what looked easy for them at that point seemed very hard to me. But I knew what I needed to do. So I traded in my heavy old hiking boots, because I thought if you're in Colorado, you have to wear hiking boots. I realized I was the only one wearing hiking boots. Everybody else had running shoes on. So I traded in my hiking boots, bought some running shoes, and then sometimes I could only run like 100 yards. Like, I'm going to run up to that tree. And so I'd run, and I'd get to that tree. It's like, whew. And then I'd walk a couple of the switchbacks. Then I'd run up to the next, and I would do this. And I slowly added distance, and I slowly added intensity. And it took me a couple of years. And then I did something called the ascent, which is where you run and, force hike up to the top. And then after a while, I was able to do the marathon where you run up and down, though I still can't run the whole thing up. Most of it, but not all of it. And, so I got to the point where I, too, really conquered that mountain. It's not a great challenge. There's many challenges out there. But what I'm saying, for a guy who couldn't even hike it, but it was incremental. I just made my mind up. I wanted to do it. So I got started. I just got started. What goal do you have that might seem like a mountain of a goal? That might seem, that's way too big. There's no way. Well, just get started. If you know it's the right goal for you, if you really believe that's the right thing for you, then get started on it. Making a friend? Get started. Whatever it is, a better job. Quote, the secret of getting ahead is getting started. Mark Twain. Even Jesus had to get started in his training to become the Christ. I'm sure he was born, but he still had to train himself to be the Christ. Luke 2, 39 and 40. I'm going to read it from the Voice. After fulfilling their sacred duties according to the law of the Lord, Mary and Joseph returned with Jesus to their own city of Nazareth in the province of Galilee. There Jesus grew up, maturing in physical strength and increasing in wisdom, and the grace of God rested on him. Even a person born perfect like Jesus had to discipline themselves to grow incrementally and to build strength enough to carry out his calling. Even as a child, he had to decide he was going to obey his mom and dad. They had to decide at first, at one point, he's going to take this on. But he had to start somewhere. So he grew physically and he grew in wisdom of the scriptures. Quote, the first step toward success is taken when you refuse to be a captive of the environment in which you first find yourself. Mark Cain, he's an American climate scientist. Refuse to be a captive of the environment in which we find ourselves. Refuse it. Get started. Progressive resistance is simply doing more and more and more and a little bit more over a period of time. You can't jump to the big heavy weights. You got to start easy, especially if you've laid off for a while. You can't go run a marathon if you've never run. It'd be foolish. You'd hurt yourself. You got to strengthen those ligaments. One time, after running for a while, I was running like 33 miles a week one year, and my knees started hurting. And so I went to the doctor at a physical, and I said, my knees hurt from running. He said, stop running. And I said, I'm not going to stop running. I said, I just started running. And then after a couple of months, I never had pain again because my joints weren't used to the pounding because I hadn't run in years really for any length of time, especially going uphill and on rocks and, through trails and stuff. So start small, stay faithful, and increase weight slowly. Get started is the first step. Just get started. The second step is stay faithful. Stay faithful. Now, at first, Jesus' parents took on the job of training this young lad to be the Messiah. Imagine being tasked with that. Imagine if God said, okay, you have got to raise the Messiah. It's like, what? They had heard about him their whole life, children of Israel. Something. And by the time Jesus was a tween, about 12 years old, he took some of the training into his own hands, and to his parents' dismay. And he knew who he was, and he began to faithfully and incrementally prepare himself for the tasks ahead. Quote, kindness and faithfulness keep a king safe. Through kindness, his throne is made secure. King Solomon. Kindness and faithfulness keep a king safe. Luke chapter 2, we're going to read 41 through 49. I from the Voice. Every year during Jesus' childhood, his parents traveled to Jerusalem for the Passover celebration. When Jesus was 12, he made the journey with them. He had spent several days there participating in the whole celebration. And when his parents left for home, Jesus stayed in Jerusalem. But Joseph and Mary were not aware, and they assumed Jesus was elsewhere in the caravan that was traveling together. And after they had already traveled a full day's journey toward home, they began searching for him among their friends and relatives. When no one had seen the boy, Mary and Joseph rushed back to Jerusalem and searched for him. After 3 days of separation, they finally found him sitting among a group of religious teachers in the temple, asking them questions, listening to their answers. Everyone was surprised and impressed that a 12-year-old boy could have such deep understanding and could answer questions with such wisdom. His parents, of course, had a different reaction. Mary, son, why have you treated us this way? Listen, your father and I have been sick with worry for the last 3 days, wondering where you were, looking everywhere for you. Jesus, why did you need to look for me? Didn't you know that I must be working for my father? His parents are like, what? Imagine your son disappearing for 3 days, a 12-year-old in the biggest city of a country. A 12-year-old boy at that time was only a couple of years away from becoming of marriageable age. So they weren't considered a boy, they were considered a young man. Almost ready. People were already looking for mates for people when they're 12. It's a different culture than we have today. By the time they're 30, they're probably a grandparent, or 32. Because they get married 14, 15, have a kid right away. That's how it was. Jesus' mother was probably, when he was pinned to that tree, she was probably maybe 45 years old. You know, isn't that something? 47 years old. She wasn't that old. You see, they were considered men, young men, not boys. And Jesus began on his own to faithfully lift more. He knew what he was about. He was beginning to learn what he was going to have to go through, and he had to get his stuff together. Quote, "Nothing is more noble, nothing is more venerable than fidelity. Faithfulness and truth are the most sacred excellences and endowments of the human mind." Marcus Tullius Cicero. Faithfulness and truth are the most sacred excellences and endowments of the human mind. Got to be faithful. Get started. Now be faithful. If you're going to run, then just keep it up. But if you don't increase the intensity or you don't increase the distance, then your muscles will just get used to that, and you'll never get better. Like the old saying, if you want to run faster, you have to run faster. You have to increase it. If you want to get better at your job, you got to do something to get better at it. You got to take on more responsibility. Do something more. Make more calls. Bid more jobs. Do more than is expected of you if you want to get better or want to take on more responsibility. Just so you know, when Jesus poured through the scrolls about what the Messiah would have to go through in order to fulfill his calling, he knew he would need to strengthen himself like no human had ever attempted to strengthen their mind and body before. Here's some of the attributes of the Christ, learning about the Christ. Now he's reading he's about. I'm going to go through a few things. He read what the prophets of old said he was going to have to go through. One is a man of the wilderness is going to prepare the way for him. That's Isaiah 43 and Malachi 3:1. And that turned out to be his cousin John. John the Baptist prepared the way for him. So he would be a prophet like Moses. Deuteronomy 18, 15, and 19. Now, for a young boy, that would be some big shoes to fill. Moses? The guy who parted that sea, who did those miracles, who stood up face to face, nose to nose with the Pharaoh, who basically saved them from one of the most powerful army in the world, the Egyptian army. Now he's going to be like that. That's something. And he was going to perform many miracles, it says in Isaiah 35, 5 and 6. So imagine, if you never even seen a miracle, now you got a picture doing it, like you read about in the Bible. Wonder if that might work for us too. He would get viciously attacked by the devil, but ultimately defeat that great enemy of humanity. And Genesis 3:15 talks about that. He knew he was going to get beat, but then he was going to come back at some point and beat this thing down. Imagine that, going up against this, having to stand toe to toe with the devil. He knew he was going to have to. You think you might read a couple more verses? What about getting your body ready? We're going to see he did that too. How about he's going to be hated? Psalm 69:4. Imagine knowing that you're going to be a hated person. That's not something that one looks forward to. But he had to prepare himself for it. He's going to be betrayed by a friend, Psalm 41:9. And even knowing that, he sought out some very good friends and very trusted partners, one of whom turned on him, betrayed him. He knew this was going to happen since he was a child. He also read in these scriptures that he will be despised and rejected by others. Despised and rejected, Isaiah 53:3. Imagine knowing you're going to be despised because you speak love, light, and truth. He will be beaten and spit upon. Isaiah 50, verse 6. He's going to be beaten and spit upon. He knew this was going to happen to him. How do you prepare your mind for that? His hands and feet are going to be pierced clean through. That's a prophecy in Psalm 22:16 and Zechariah 10:12. Ouch. Imagine knowing that's going to happen to you. He's going to be beat beyond recognition. Isaiah 52:14. You might start thinking, TMI. That's too much information. But it wasn't for Jesus. He just took it on. He read that he was going to bleed out and die while being staked to a tree. Psalm 22. Imagine knowing that and still deciding to go through it for the good of others. You're going to lose your life for other people. But here we go. He knew he was going to rise from the dead. Psalm 16:10. Now we're starting to talk here. He knew that he was going to ascend into heaven and lead captivity captive. That's not just Ephesians, that's Psalm 68:18. That's Old Testament, folks. He also knew that he was going to be the Son of God. Psalm 2:7. I'd say that puts an exclamation point on it. So all those things, he knew, and he had to get himself to the point where he could do it and believe it. Somebody tells you, oh, you're going to rise from the dead. Yeah, right, bub. Having never seen it happen before, and then ascend to sit at the right hand of God? What a mind picture. But that kept him going. Who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of God. That's the New Testament. The joy that was set before us. It's that goal, but it's incremental work to get there. He knew exactly who he was and what he would have to go through. So do you. You all know who you are. And you know you're going to get thumped a time or two. You know you're going to fail a time or two, but what do? You dust yourself off and you get up and you keep going. God's like that crazy parent on the sideline when you fall down in your soccer game. Get up, get up, get up. The parent's yelling. Or in the ice rink, get up. Jesus knew how to start. He was extremely faithful. Extremely faithful. He just had to keep adding weight now. He had to start taking it on. He had to add some stressors, some stress. He had to add responsibility. He had to add knowledge and training until he reached full maturity. He wasn't ready yet. Quote, "There are only two mistakes one can make along the road to truth. Not going all the way and not starting." Buddha. Like the legend of Milo and the growth of Jesus, we too must get started, stay faithful to our goals and to our callings, and now start adding weight incrementally, day by day or week by week, however you need to do it. Increase slowly. See, Jesus' training went on for about 30 years. Now, he wasn't ready to carry out the responsibilities of the Christ when he was 5, 10, 20, or even 28 years of age. He wasn't ready. Milo wasn't ready the first time he put that calf on his neck to pick up a whole ox. But it's an incremental growth. Little bit at a time. Make tomorrow a little better than today. If you're trying to control your tongue, then say less negatives tomorrow and less the following day and more positives the next day. Pretty soon you're just a positive machine. You walk into the mall, you got that smile, you don't even know why you have it. Because you just love life, you love yourself. Pretty soon people around you are starting to smile. It's contagious, folks. You know, it took years of increasingly difficult training to get him to the point that he could take on the devil directly. And he knew he was going to have to. Isn't that the first prophecy in the Bible? Plus he knew he was going to have to take on that little matter of saving humanity. Just that small little matter. Taking on the sins of the world. What do you do with that in your head? I have trouble making a sales call. You know? Not taking on the problems of the world, taking on the devil directly. The famous Hippocrates explained the principle behind this progressive resistance when he wrote, "That which is used develops, and that which is not used wastes away." Let's use the tools God gave us. You have more than just your 5 senses, folks. You have the Spirit of God. That's the only thing that can beat down the enemy. It's our greatest advantage. How many miracles did Jesus do before he was 30 years old? None. Was he perfect? Can you be better than perfect? Only thing you can do that's better than perfect is walk with spiritual power. But it takes time and training. It's incremental training. And it's something in many ways you have to do yourself. Sure, you could take a class here and there and learn the principles. That's great. But to really walk with power, it's you and God, baby. It's you and God. Do you want to? Or do you not? If not, it just wastes away. When I lived on base in Japan, I had a neighbor kid who tried to parachute out his second-story window from base housing, holding the four corners of a bed sheet. Yes, he broke his arm. And I was amazed a few weeks later when he removed that cast, and his arm was just a pasty white. And it was so much, it was half the size. It was so skinny, it was half the size of his other arm. Because of lack of use. And it took him more than the rest of the summer to rebuild the strength in that arm. See, but incrementally it came back because he had to use it. He naturally would use that. Well, let's naturally use the tools God gave us. If we've allowed our spiritual selves to atrophy, let's get it back. Start doing what you do know how to do spiritually. And if you mix that with a lifestyle of truth and light and love, boom, you are a powerhouse. You're going to finally reach those goals you've been wanting to reach. But it's incremental. You're not just going to get there. We all just want to be there. You think you do one spiritual thing and you're there. No. It doesn't work that way. You don't lift one little weight. You don't put 5 pounds on your bar. And then next day you put on 200 pounds on each side. Doesn't work that way. Quote, perfection is attained by slow degrees. It requires the hand of time. Voltaire. Slow degrees. All great minds understand this. That's why you do. That's why you do. You have great minds. Just before Jesus believed that he himself was strong enough to take on the world, the negative power of this world, something amazing happened to him. He received a powerful version of Holy Spirit power. He received the Spirit of God, which he did not have before. He'd been perfect for 30 years of his life. Yet he had not begun to accomplish even one of the things that he had read about. He needed that last ingredient, that last tool. He saw things differently now. He heard things differently now. He was totally different. I remember when I first got born again, I think I was 17. I think that's when I got born again. It's when I started getting interested again. And all of a sudden, I heard words to songs that I liked that I never heard. I started hearing things and seeing things I never saw before. And it was amazing to me. I was a totally different person. And I've never been the same since. And I'm not chasing the high of that first experience of Holy Spirit. I'm so far beyond that, just like you are. Not like heroin, where they're always chasing that first high and then it'll never be the same. It's not like that. Holy Spirit, you can just keep growing. It's limitless. It's a limitless God. He's done everything for us so that we can live incredibly and abundantly. See, this addition of Holy Spirit changed everything. He saw things different. He felt a connection with the Creator like he never had before. He had a connection intellectually. But now he had a connection physically. You have it too, folks. Every single Christian has that connection. Do you feel it? Do you understand it? Are you seeing things bigger? Do you hear things like nobody else hears? I say you do. Another sport I took up after moving to Colorado was downhill skiing. And after about 3 years of rounding up gear and skiing a few times a year, I had all this used stuff, but I seemed to have stagnated, and I just wasn't getting any better. So I thought, maybe skiing's not my sport, because I pretty much bite at this sport. Everybody else looks so smooth and clean, and I didn't. And so my friend Todd asked if I would drive up to see him and go skiing with him at Crested Butte where he worked. And so I obliged. And my wife and I drove up there, and this guy had once been a ski instructor himself, and I thought just maybe he could pick out that single flaw that I had and help me get back to skiing like I could dream of myself, or like I saw everybody else seem to be doing. And after watching me, he skied behind me for a few runs. He said, "Come on down to the shop and let's try on a different set of skis." And so we skied down to his shop, and he handed me a set of freshly tuned racing skis. And he said, "Here, take these for a test drive." And so I stomped into my bindings, and off we went. And all of a sudden, I could ski better than I ever had before. And I thanked him. I said, "I can't believe it." He said, "Your used gear was designed for a guy 50 pounds lighter and 6 inches shorter than you." He said, "They don't have the torsional rigidity needed for someone of your size." And he told me, "Your problem was your equipment, not your technique." See, his expert eye and test driving properly fitting equipment helped renew my love for skiing. You know, what equipment do you need? Are you using somebody else's philosophy that's worn out and flimsy? Like those skis that I had, they wouldn't grab, they just twisted. Do we have twisted scripture in our mind? Have we been mistrained? I'll say all of us in some ways, yes. Or we'd be living perfectly, right? It's available to live perfectly. And usually we hit it at a time, or every once in a while, sporadically. But it's that twisted scripture, those twisted thoughts, twisted habit patterns that have no torsional rigidity, that keep us from living and moving at the speed that we're designed to live and move and go. We have the right equipment, folks. We've been given it. But you have to put your mind into deciding if you want to be trained or not. I could have just quit skiing, but my friend said, "No, just give it one more shot. Come on out here. Let me take a peek." We can help each other. You see things that I don't see, and I see things you don't see. That's the beauty of the body. Jesus wanted to take that newfound Spirit of God for a test drive, and he knew he was God's Son, and he had to start acting like it if he was going to go through the punishment that he knew awaited. Quote, "Do not pray for tasks equal to your powers. Pray for powers equal to your tasks." Philip Brooks. See, Jesus needed to get himself into the best shape of his life now. He knew it was just about to happen. Everything was going to hit. He is about to go face to face with his biggest challenges that we just read about. And he went off and did some solo wilderness training. He had to add some weight. He had to add some strength as he lost weight, so to speak. He did 40 days of fasting. And in Matthew chapter 4, and we're going to read 1 through 11, I'm going to read from the Message, the test. Next, Jesus was taken into the wilderness by the Spirit for the test. The devil was ready to give it. Jesus prepared for that test by fasting 40 days and 40 nights. And that left him, of course, in a state of extreme hunger, which the devil took advantage of in the first test. "Since you are God's Son, speak the word that will turn these stones into loaves of bread." Jesus answered by quoting Deuteronomy. It takes more than bread to stay alive. It takes a steady stream of words from God's mouth. For the second test, the devil took him to the holy city. He sat him on the top of the temple and said, "Since you are God's son, jump!" The devil goaded him by quoting Psalm 91. He has placed you in the care of angels. They will catch you so that you won't so much as stub your toe on a stone. They walked together many miles back to Jerusalem. Jesus and whatever the devil looked like at that point. Probably not a red suit with a pointy tail. Probably looked like somebody he would like to have hung out with. Or else how would it be a temptation? It was amazing that Jesus did this. Equally amazing was that the devil knows his scripture and knows how to twist it. Verse 7, Jesus countered with another citation from Deuteronomy. Don't you dare test the Lord your God. Verse 8, for the third test, the devil took him to the peak of a huge mountain. And he gestured expansively, pointing out all the earth's kingdoms and how glorious they all were. Then he said, they're yours, lock, stock, and barrel. Just go down on your knees and worship me. And they're yours. Now they walked together to the tallest mountain in the area, and the devil, the old angel of manipulated light, showed him a magnificent PowerPoint presentation. All the kingdoms of the world in a panoramic view. Crazy impressive. Quote, talk low, talk slow, and don't say too much. John Wayne. Verse 10, Jesus' refusal was curt. Beat it, Satan. And he backed his rebuke with a third quotation from Deuteronomy. Worship the Lord your God and only him. Serve him with absolute single-heartedness. Verse 11, the test was over. The devil left, and in his place, angels. Angels came and took care of Jesus' needs. You think he was wiped out? You think he was wiped out? 40 days of fasting and having to go through a punishing, grueling two sets of three temptations of the devil himself? You ever been with somebody who just wore you out? You had to spend a day or two with them on a job or in the military or something? You know, maybe you were married to them. You know? And it just sapped everything out of him. And it took angels to minister to him. Makes me wonder, what won't God do for us? No temptation that you could go through, somebody else hasn't already gone through. There's always a way to escape, always a way to get over. You know, and there was wild animals that also tempted him. Imagine being alone in the wilderness, not eating, and sleeping out under the stars. I mean, there was wolves then. There was mountain lions then. That's why they had the city walls, to protect themselves and the people. It's crazy stuff. You see, if you read both Mark 11 and Luke 4, you're going to see that the adversary did the three temptations 2 times. I'm not going to take the time to teach that. You see, they'd always worked before. Every human, every single other human on earth that has ever lived fell to one or another or a combination of those. Every time you fall, it's always those same things. Like I said before, do you really believe this God stuff? You know, do you really believe it? You know, I mean, do you really believe that God takes care of you? That God will heal you? You really believe God's really going to take care of your every need? Or is he just talk? Quote, you have to slow your heart rate. Stay calm. You have to shoot in between your heartbeats. Chris Kyle, American Snipers. Took years of training to where he could hit targets like he did. Incremental learning. Incremental. And in closing, today I wanted to remind you of a simple, time-tested way to improve in anything that you set your mind to do. It's called the art or the science of progressive resistance. And this secret of progressive resistance has been handed down from trainer to client, from successful person to newly successful person for many thousands of years. Progressive resistance works. And the beauty of progressive resistance is that we only need to push ourselves in small doses. We increase our efforts slowly and incrementally. We improve and advance in whatever you need to, a little bit at a time. Progressive resistance is simply doing more over time. We start small, we stay faithful, and like a growing weightlifter, we increase the weight slowly. Take it on a little bit at a time. Like the legend of Milo, we just added a little more to our shoulder than we did the week before. And then the next week, you add a little bit more and a little bit more. And within a year, you will be a totally different person in whatever your goal is. Like Jesus grew from that child who was told he would be the Christ to the 12-year-old who amazes scholars when he began to take it on his own, to the man who backed down the devil. We too can use the principle of progressive resistance to gain the strength we need to handle any task we set our mind on and to fulfill our individual calling. That is the art and science of progressive resistance. God bless.